Most people think I'm crazy when they hear that I wake up at 4:45 a.m. every day. But if I'm gonna be honest, I really think it's just the tip of the iceberg for self-improvement. Like, it really only took about 2 weeks to implement, just 2 weeks of discomfort, and now my productivity is 10 times what it used to be. And I'm not joking when I say this. Waking up early has genuinely been one of the best returns I've ever got out of a single change. So anyway, it's about like 6:30 right now, out at a lake in Montana, and I just kind of felt like coming out here and trying to convince you to actually implement this change for once, even though you probably heard it 100,000 times. You probably think it's stupid, but I'm here to tell you it's really not. It really does make a huge difference. And like me, I'm assuming that you don't want to live, a typical life where you just work a job you don't really like, retire and die, the classic story. So yeah, you probably aspire to be like exceptional. And that's where I'm at. I really want to make a real difference. So if that resonates with you, just hear me out and just try to implement this, okay? So I'm gonna tell you why waking up early is so beneficial, how to do it, and the common misconceptions, and then we'll just go over all of those, and hopefully you'll be convinced. I'm convinced that you'll be convinced, so let's just get right into it. So easily, one of the biggest benefits of waking up early is just there's absolutely nobody to distract you. Nobody's awake at fucking 5 a.m. I promise you that. It's a very, very small percentage. And a lot of those people were literally just awake all night, It's like the degens and then like the super driven people that are awake at 5 a.m. And just having nobody distract you is so nice. My phone is off and it's on Don't Disturb anyway, but like nobody could physically distract me at all. Nobody could knock on my door. Nobody's gonna really try to interact with me in person. And that's just kind of nice knowing that, there's almost no chance. I've gotten into like the best flow states of working at 5 a.m. And that's also just like where most of the benefits come from, I think, is just being in a distractionless environment. Your focus is absolutely insane. When I wake up before it's light outside, I used to like feel depressed and use that as a coping point to not wake up early. I was like, oh, I feel depressed when I wake up and there's no sun. But now I like relish it and I really enjoy that actually. So another huge point that people probably don't talk about is the insane identity change you kind of go through, because once you're the guy waking up at 4 or 5, some insane number like that, you really feel, a sense of pride in yourself that you're at least able to do this. Like, this is something that people don't really do. When you're able to make this one change, it's kind of like a domino effect. You're like, okay, I did this one thing. That means I could do much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I could do this. You have just way more respect for yourself when you wake up super early and you have intention. You know what you want to do. You're chasing your goals in a productive way. You know the benefits of waking up early, so you don't let people convince you otherwise. So how do you actually wake up early? So I always want to just recommend just jumping right into it, but then every time I try doing some shit like this, I realize how just fucking stupid that is, and it never works. So my philosophy is basically progressive overload. Progressive overload is applicable to so many different things, and this is one of them. If you don't know what that is, it basically comes from weightlifting. It's like you need to progressively add weight or reps over time. Obviously, you can't just go from a 1 plate bench to a fucking 3 plate bench. You have to build up very slowly over time. Yeah, it's the same with sleep. I recommend giving yourself a 2 to 4 week period where you just slowly set the time back over and over and over again. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you're at the time that you want to be at. And another important point on this is try to stick to your sleeping schedule as good as possible. Like, every single day you need to wake up when you say you are going to. You can't like sleep in any of these times. It's pretty simple. Like, that's basically all you do. Of course, you want to get your sleep habits in check. And when I talk about like good sleeping habits, most people just intuitively know that. Like, don't drink too much caffeine. Don't drink caffeine too late in the day. Don't have a fucking screen in bed. I could go over so many different strategies. Those are on YouTube. I might talk about it later. But, have good sleep habits. I guess I will mention one because this one isn't talked about as much. Of course, set an alarm for waking up, but also set an alarm to go to bed. And it should be like non-negotiable. When you're in the middle of something, it doesn't matter. If this alarm goes off, you need to like go to bed. okay? And of course you're aiming to get like what, 7 to 9 hours of sleep, something like that. So yeah, it's really that simple. If you follow that, you will make it eventually. Of course, you're gonna have some discomfort associated with it because you're probably not gonna get enough sleep for a bit. You might a few days, not every day probably. And yeah, you're gonna be probably pretty tired while you try to do this, but the end result is worth it. You already know that. So yeah, we're just gonna go over the common mistakes. Well, the first one, of course, just changing the sleep schedule too quickly. Like, don't just expect to be waking up at 5 a.m. if you've been waking up at 8, 9, 10. Like, don't just set it back immediately. You're totally setting yourself up for failure. So do the progressive overload method, of course. And then another huge factor to being able to wake up early is having something to work towards. If you wake up at 5 and you don't have anything to do, like, what's really the point? You know what I mean? For a while, for me, it was going to the gym really, really early. Nowadays, it's more about working on my passions like music or like YouTube, stuff like that. And if you don't have this, it's just so much harder to actually wake up and stick to it because it's like, there's no point. You're not really getting too much benefit out of it. I think a lot of the benefit of waking up in the morning is getting a big block of work done right away with no distractions, having a really nice deep work session. The days where I just forgot to plan what I was gonna do the next morning and I just woke up at 5, those are the days that I usually would just be like, oh, fuck it, I'm sleeping in, you know? Like, you gotta have something to do. Every night before, schedule exactly what you're gonna do the next morning. Also, like, have everything set up and ready to go so there's like no friction to actually doing it. Another huge mistake is just not sticking to it long enough. People try to wake up this early and they think that they're gonna be tired forever waking up at this time. But if you stick to it long enough, it's not gonna be that difficult. Like, I wake up at 4:45 a.m. feeling the exact same way that I used to waking up at like 8 or 9 a.m., you know? Like, it feels exactly the same. I'm just used to it. I acclimated to waking up earlier. And I don't know if people understand that. Like, when they hear about people waking up this early, they're like, how the fuck does he do that? Oh my God, that's so early. If you change your sleep schedule, you're just gonna feel the same as if you woke up later. If you don't stick it to it long enough, you're like, oh, I'm tired, this isn't for me. I promise you, like, it'll become way easier over time. The first few weeks is definitely the hardest. You're definitely pretty tired. But once you get through that hurdle, it's easy sailing. It's just like living normally. And then the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to mistakes is just, I think there's times you're going to want to prioritize your schedule over your sleep. And what I mean by that is, when I started waking up early, there was circumstances where I would go to bed too late and I'd be like, oh fuck, I'm not going to get enough sleep. There's no shot. If I wake up at 5, I'm not getting enough sleep. And there was times where I would be like, okay, I should probably sleep in. I should probably get 8 hours, right? But I've changed my mind on that now, because you'd be surprised the amount of cool shit I've made in times where I was sleep deprived and decided to like wake up at 5 anyway, you know? I made like really cool ideas in music production and stuff on those days a lot of the times. Of course, if it's extreme, if you're going to bed at like fucking 2 a.m. for some reason, God forbid, yeah, I probably would recommend sleeping in a bit there, because waking up at 5, you're gonna be so sleep deprived that your brain's gonna be mush. So of course there's limits to it, but you know, if you're maybe gonna get like 6 hours of sleep or something like that, I'd say there's an argument to be made that, you know, prioritizing the schedule in that case would be okay to do. Of course, you don't want to be chronically sleep deprived. You don't want to be waking up with 6 hours of sleep every day. So if that becomes a problem, then there's something you need to change with your sleep habits and see if it fixes itself. So yeah, that's about it. Just remember that you got to change to change. You got to be the exception to be exceptional. I love those quotes. You know, when you finally get to a point where you're waking up early, people are going to try to convince you to not do it, that it's extreme, that it's just stupid. But this is the type of thing it takes to drastically improve yourself. It build yourself into the person that you want to be, you know? So this is just one small step. There's so many different things you could do, but this is a huge one. I really think this one has got to be one of the top things that I've done so far. And I've done a lot of different like self-improvement things, and this is way up there for sure. Just remember that once you acclimate to waking up once, you never have to do it again. You know, it's just a small period of time for a huge amount of gains. So after that, it's just easy sailing, and you could do it forever basically, and you have way more productivity. So if I haven't convinced you, I don't know what else will. I hope you take some action. It'll be good for you. So yeah, see you later.